who loves cats? Of course, Cat Bologna does. And who would ever say no to a cat girl? I don't think anyone would. Well, everyone loves cat girls. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the kit of CIPHER, a new cat girl character from the Nihility path who will be released in patch 3.3. Yep, when we hear about a new Nihility unit, most of you are probably wondering, will she be a good match and synergize well with ACHERON? And what kind of utility does she bring to the team? So without further ado, let's dive in. CIPHER is a limited 5-star character with the quantum element, following the path of Nihility. Her main gimmick or unique mechanic lies in applying a mark to a single enemy, and whenever a teammate attacks that mark target, CIPHER follows up with extra attack. But that's not all, this mark also records all incoming damage dealt to that enemy and the ones around it. Once enough damage has been stored, CIPHER can unleash it all as true damage using her ultimate, which has a low energy cost. On top of that, CIPHER passively reduces enemy defense by a certain percentage, just by being on the battlefield. So essentially she's a sub DPS with built-in debuffing capabilities. As for her base stats, she comes with a base attack of 640 and speed of 106. Once you unlock all of her traces, the additional stats she gains are speed, quantum damage boost, and HP. Now let's talk about her abilities. Her basic attack is nothing too special. It targets a single enemy and deals quantum damage equal to 100% of her attack. Her skill, however, hits up to 3 enemies, dealing 200 damage to the main target and 100% to adjacent enemies. When the skill is used, CIPHER also has a best chance of 120% to apply Weaken to all 3 enemies, reducing their damage dealt by 10%. While the debuff is not massive, this skill also boosts CIPHER's attack by 30% for 2 turns. Keep in mind, this attack buff likely can't beat stack. Before we dive into CIPHER's ultimate, it's actually easier to understand if we talk about her talent first. So CIPHER applies a special mark debuff called Regular Customer to one enemy if there is not already a marked target on the field. This debuff will automatically prioritize the enemy with the highest HP, which often means it will land on elite enemies or bosses. However, if you use her skill or ultimate, the main target of those abilities will be marked instead. So what does this regular customer debuff actually do? Whenever an ally attacks the marked enemy, CIPHER will launch a follow-up attack that deals 400 damage. But here's the catch, this follow-up attack can only trigger once. To reset it and be able to trigger it again, CIPHER must use her ultimate. But that's not all. Her talent also lets her record all non-true damage dealt to the enemy affected by regular customer mark. CIPHER stores 15% of that incoming damage, and it continues building up over time. Once she uses her ultimate, all the recorded damage is released. Interestingly, there's no stated cap on how much damage can be recorded, so the more your team hits, the bigger the burst CIPHER can unleash, even though she only stores a fraction of the original damage. So what exactly does CIPHER's ultimate do? It has an incredibly low energy cost of just 100, making it highly spammable. When activated, CIPHER performs a blast-style attack that hits up to 3 enemies. The sequence starts with her striking the main target, dealing 120% damage, then immediately followed by true damage equal to 25% of the total damage she has previously recorded with her talent. After that, she attacks again, this time hitting the main target and its adjacent enemies for 40% damage, and then unleashes another burst of true damage, this time equal to 75% of the stored value, spread across all 3 enemies. So in total, her ultimate hits twice. The first strike is a single target attack with true damage, and the second is a blast attack that also applies true damage. This is CIPHER's most powerful ability. Well, let's just hope the devs don't decide to nerf that energy cost later on. Moving on to her traces and technique. CIPHER's first major trace allows her to reduce enemy defense by 30% just by being present on the battlefield, making her immediately valuable even without needing to act. Additionally, at the start of each wave, she gains an action advance of 10%, helping her attack turn faster. At first, the damage recording effect from her talent only applies to a single target that has been marked with regular customer debuff. However, once you unlock her second trace, this changes slightly. CIPHER will start recording damage from other enemies as well, so AoE DPS should be fine with her, although only at 5% of the incoming damage compared to the main target's full percentage. Her third trace is where the things really get interesting, especially when it comes to speed. If CIPHER reaches a speed of 140, she gains 25% increase to her crit rate, and if she hits 170 speed, her crit rate goes up even further to 50%. Alongside that, her damage recording ability also improves. At 140 speed, the recorded value increases by 50%, and at 170 speed, it doubles, increasingly by 100%. This means if you manage to get her speed high enough, she will be able to store up 30% of the damage dealt to the marked target and 10% from the other enemies, making her burst damage even more devastating. Now let's talk about her technique. CIPHER gets what's called Zagreus Blessing when she uses it. This places her in stealth mode for 15 seconds and boosts her movement speed by 50%, which can be extremely useful while exploring. When used in Overworld, or Simulated Universe, or Divergent Universe, there's also a chance to gather consumable items on the spot, up to a limit of 50. Then when battle begins, after activating the technique, CIPHER immediately strikes all enemies with quantum damage. What's more, the recorded value from this initial damage is multiplied by 200%, giving her a solid head start in building her true damage potential. And that wraps up CIPHER's kit, at least her version 1 at E0. But we have only scratched the surface here, so what about her EIDOLONS? Let's talk about that next. Initially, CIPHER can only trigger her follow-up attack once, and she needs to use her ultimate to reset that trigger. But with EIDOLON 1, she can now trigger her follow-up attack twice before needing to reset. This gives her a noticeable bump in consistency, especially in longer fights. But that's not all. Every time CIPHER hits an enemy, regardless of whether it's through a basic attack, skill, or any other ability, there's now a 120% base chance to apply a debuff that increases the target's damage taken by 25% for 2 turns. This debuff also falls under the vulnerability category, and this is important because it potentially makes CIPHER a perfect match for ACHERON. Not only does she apply vulnerability, which ACHERON needs to her stack mechanics, but she also gets more follow-up triggers, which means more frequent debuffs and better synergy overall. As for EIDOLON 2, CIPHER's recorded damage becomes 150% of its original value, giving a massive boost to her talent's effectiveness. In addition to that, whenever she performs her follow-up attack from her talent, she gains 80% bonus crit damage for the next 2 turns. This lets her hit even harder with both her follow-ups and her ultimate shortly afterward. Later on, EIDOLON 4 gives her a way to deal a bit of extra chip damage. Every time an ally attacks an enemy that's been marked with regular customer, CIPHER dishes out a small additional damage, helping increase overall team damage output, even outside her turn. Finally, her 6 EIDOLON super changes her damage. Her follow-up attacks will now deal 350% increased damage, turning each trigger into a major threat. But more importantly, once she uses her ultimate and expands the recorded value, that value doesn't just disappear anymore. Instead, 20% of the recorded damage is preserved and carried over, ready to build upon again. This allows CIPHER to maintain momentum across turns rather than starting from scratch after every ultimate. So based on what we have seen in this version 1 beta, I think the most valuable EIDOLONs are EIDOLON 1 and 2. If your goal is to make CIPHER more flexible and expand her team synergy options, especially with ACHERON, then EIDOLON 1 is absolutely the way to go. With 2 follow-up attacks triggers and consistent vulnerability debuffing, CIPHER can actively contribute to building ACHERON's ultimate stacks. But if your priority is pushing CIPHER's personal damage output, then EIDOLON 2 might be the better investment. By enhancing the recorded value and giving her a free boost to crit damage just from triggering her follow-ups, her burst potential becomes significantly stronger. So what about CIPHER's signature light cone? Equipping it grants the user an immediate 18% boost to speed, which is already a huge win for any Nihility characters, especially CIPHER herself. On top of that, every time the user performs an attack, there's one 20% base chance to apply an effect called Bamboozled. This debuff reduces the target's defense by 16% for 2 turns, creating more openings for your team to deal increased damage. But there's more. If the user's speed exceeds 170, then there's also a chance to trigger an additional debuff called Theft alongside Bamboozled, which further reduces the enemy's defense by 8%. However, it's important to note that Bamboozled and Theft don't stack. Only the most recently applied effect will remain active. So even though both can be triggered, they rotate rather than amplify each other. This design makes the LC more flexible. It's not only a solid fit for CIPHER, but can also work on other Nihility characters, such as Pella, provided you can meet the rather high speed threshold. That bonus speed is universally appreciated by support units. But let's be real, if you can push your unit past that 170 speed mark, The alternating debuff system becomes particularly useful in teams that care about inflicting multiple types of debuff, such as ACHERON-based teams. Since both Bamboozled and Theft count as debuff independently, even though only one defense reduction effect is applied at a time, they still contribute to stacking ACHERON's ultimate conditions. So in that context, this light count not only enhances Cypher's personal effectiveness, but also her team utility, by enabling more frequent debuff applications. So the big question, is Cypher actually a good match for ACHERON? Honestly, for most players, that's probably the first thing that came to mind the moment they heard a new Nihility unit was coming. And in theory, yes, she absolutely fits. Cypher is a Nihility character, which means she can contribute directly to ACHERON's trace requirements, helping her unlock bigger damage potential more efficiently. However, when it comes to stacking ACHERON's ultimate, Cypher's true synergy is locked behind her Eidolon 1. Only at E1 does she gain the ability to trigger 2 follow-up attacks before needing to reset them with her ultimate. And since her follow-up applies vulnerability, which counts as a debuff, it becomes essential for helping ACHERON ramp up stacks faster. Without E1, Cypher can still work with her, but the synergy won't be as smooth or consistent. But then the question becomes, is it actually realistic to reach 170 speed on Cypher? And the answer is yes, it's still doable. Even though her base speed was nerfed, originally she had 113 base speed, but that's been reduced. Now Cypher starts with 106 base speed, and if you fully unlock her traces, she gains an additional 14 speed, bringing her to 120. Now let's talk about Relic. If you give her speed boots, that's another 25 speed, so we have already sitting at 145. From there, you only need 25 more to hit that sweet spot of 170. You have a few ways to get there. The most straightforward one is to pull for her LC, which gives an 18% speed bonus. That basically solves the problem instantly. But if you're not planning to go for her light cone, then the next best option is to grind for relics with speed substats. So while it takes a bit of setup, hitting 170 speed on Cypher is absolutely within reach, and well worth the effort. So overall, Cypher is a pretty strong sub DPS unit. She relies on your main DPS to dish out heavy hits, records a portion of that damage, and then unleash it back on enemies with a blast type attack that deals significantly true damage. This makes her an excellent support for boosting your team's overall damage output, especially when fighting multiple enemies. Even better, just by being on the field, she passively reduces all enemies' defense by 30%, and that's huge. Building Cypher also becomes a lot easier once you manage to push her speed to 170, because thanks to her traces, she will gain up to 50% bonus crit rate. But since she needs high speed to reach her full potential, she naturally becomes a very fast unit, helping her generate her low cost ultimate very quickly. Outside of Cypher's kit, her LC also quite flexible. Units like Pela can use it effectively, especially if you can hit the speed threshold. And hey, let's be real, for catgirl lovers, her existence alone is already a win, right? That said, Cypher's full potential in this version still feels locked behind Eidolon 1. That extra follow-up trigger is what really lets her shine as the second best teammate for ACHERON, right after Jiaoqiu. She also shows promise in teams with facial or daughter ratio, but in every case she feels more like a strong support option rather than a must-have. There's no single comp right now where Cypher is absolutely core or irreplaceable, so no best-in-slot teams just yet. And do keep in mind that she might turn to be a bit SP negative, considering how her kit operates as a sub DPS. So that's our full Cypher V1 kit breakdown and analysis. What do you guys think? Is Cypher shaping up to be a reliable pick, or do you feel she's missing something critical? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's hope for some good adjustments to her kit in the future. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and share it with your friends too. I will see you in the high scenes video next, so stay tuned.